There are spoilers for Deltarune chapters 1 to 4 in this video, you have been warned. Ralsei from Deltarune is quite a peculiar character. And he is referred to as a prince in the dark in the prophecy. But something weirdly ominous about him lurks behind the shadows of his character. Part of this is described in Deltarune chapters 3 to 4. But something isn't adding up, and it's clear Ralsei does in fact have different motives, and is too informed on certain topics. If Ralsei is a darkner, he has to be an object in the light world. This is something which he goes over in chapter 3. But what object is he? And how does he traverse through dark worlds? Now you might say Lancer and Rules and Starwalker both do the same thing, but the difference is they join your inventory. Ralsei, at least from what we know, isn't in your inventory. So it doesn't end up making any sense on how he could end up traveling through the dark worlds. So whose side is he on, and how is he accomplishing this? Now some people might jump the gun here and say he is a part of the Knight's team, but in the chapter 3 final boss. If you get the Knight low enough on HP, Susie breaks the sword and gets you the Shadow Crystal, but gets swooned by the Knight. Some people believe Chris had actually slashed Susie, but the theory is in pinned comment. But nonetheless, after that slash happens, regardless of who that is from, Ralsei looks up to Chris and says, "How could you?" Which means that he isn't on board with the Knight's plan. But then whose side is he on? But let's address who is Ralsei, or what object he is. Now don't get me wrong, Ralsei could be an object, simply hidden in the ball of junk that Chris contains. But it wouldn't make any sense because in chapter 2, Lancer and Rules turn to stone, while that doesn't happen to Ralsei. Is Ralsei being a prince of the dark mean he has an extended time of being in dark worlds due to experience, or is there more to that? Ralsei could also be Israel, and simply lying about being the prince of the dark and is truly a lightner. This could be a plausible theory with dialogue in chapter 3 occurring that seems to support this theory. Like for example, after board 1, when you start board 2 you can talk to Ralsei instead of thinking about Susie. And there is dialogue saying Chris has seen Ralsei's face before. But this could also be a nod on how the characters are similar. But the reason why I don't think this is real, because why would Ralsei think he is just a darkner who is designed to serve lightners in chapter 4? But if Ralsei isn't as real and the logic of him being an object isn't applicable, who is Ralsei? Also in chapter 4 Ralsei has a small moment of him floating to escape the Titan. How come he has this power? And why hasn't he used this power before? Something sinister is going on with Ralsei, and he clearly wants something more than to save the worlds, and he isn't involved in the Knight's plan. I believe if we can't figure out who Ralsei is, we might as well find out his intentions. Ralsei seems to be alone in the dark, lonely and waiting for Chris and Susie pretty much all the time. This reminds me of Gaster stuck in the core of Undertale with no way of getting out. But why would Ralsei ever want to torment Chris and Susie if they were his friends, and why is he so closely affiliated with Gaster? Maybe he doesn't want to torment them, but he clearly has a special plan that we do not know about. Ralsei also seems to be aware of us the player, and even tells us how to do certain puzzles by telling us to press Z or C on our keyboards. He also is clearly aware of our actions in the weird route. There is a difference between a certain dialogue in chapter 3. If you ask Ralsei how he is doing, then say you're not going to the festival with Susie, then say you're going with Noelle in the weird route. Ralsei's glasses go dark, and then she mentions that may be a bad idea. Keep in mind this text is different in Pacifist, with Ralsei saying that if you go with her you should also bring Susie. It doesn't make sense how Ralsei could know what is also going on in the story. It could make sense if she had info prior to the game start, such as what happens in the Roaring, the prophecy, and stuff like that. But how could she ever know actions that had happened in the weird route and during the story, and why it might be a bad idea to go with Noelle? Ralsei also several times brings up how you should close your eyes and think of Susie, which can play a cut scene. Now I'm not going to go over how this could possibly work from Chris's perspective, but it wouldn't make sense how Ralsei could know that closing your eyes could help you see Susie. His motives are unclear, and it seems like he is cursed with knowledge. Now don't come at me with pitchforks in the comments. I'm not saying Ralsei is the big ol' evil villain. It just doesn't make sense how he knows everything he does, and clearly something behind the scenes is going on. Could Ralsei possibly be working with Gaster, or has a strong affiliation with Gaster and the events of Deltarune? Gaster also seems to have an affiliation between Darker Than Dark, which Ralsei mentions in his explanation to Suzy about Darkness. I believe Toby Fox will explore this narrative later, but I would love to see what comes over this. Am I simply over-analyzing, or is this going to be a key plot point? Going back to what object Ralsei could be, I believe Ralsei is simply a manifestation of Chris's desires between his relationship with Asriel. And how Ralsei may be spawned from Chris's memories with Asriel, and close affiliations with the Dreamer family. We even see Ralsei performing fire magic during Chapter 4, for example during the Gui fight, Ralsei is using the Light Up spell, which shows him projecting fire upwards in the sky. Also during the Jackenstein fight, Ralsei can use a similar spell and increase the amount of light visible during the attacks. Which Toriel, Askari, and Asriel seem to have a very close tie between fire throughout Undertale. Projecting fire-based attacks, throughout the story. In conclusion, Ralsei is a manifestation of Chris's memory of Asriel, and his motives are very unclear, but he could have a very close affiliation with Gaster. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.